Let's look at a versatile defense to the queen's pawn game, the Dutch Stonewall. Start by moving your pawn to the square f5. This could also be played against many other first moves by white, except for the king's pawn opening. This enterprising defense is called the Dutch. Your pawn attacks the square e4, beginning a light square strategy in the middle of the board. There are different moves that reach the Dutch Stonewall, but you should develop your knight to the square f6 next. Developing your knight on the second move is a good idea in this opening. Push your pawn to the square e6 to bolster the support of your central light square strategy. The Dutch is an asymmetrical way to play that gives black good counterattacking chances without taking too much risk. Play your queen's pawn to the square d5 and clamp down on the light squares in the center. This move is critical to our variation, the Dutch Stonewall. Before initiating complications, I will castle kingside. With your central pawns on light squares, your dark-squared bishop will have maximum mobility on the square d6. You're ready to castle soon. But first, support your center by playing your pawn to the square c6. Do you see why it is called the Dutch Stonewall? Your pawns on the squares f5, e6, d5 and c6 form the characteristic Stonewall formation. With the center solidly supported, you're ready to castle. This is the starting position of the Dutch Stonewall. It's beautiful, isn't it? Next, we'll look at what happens if I exchange pawns. This example is short, but vital to remember. If I were to capture your central pawn with mine, you would have several ways to recapture. Which is best? Well played. Your pieces exert pressure down the e-file and you have rid yourself of a weak pawn. Next, we'll see how quickly your counterattack can materialize. In this example, we will see how quickly black can attack on the king side in the Dutch Stonewall. Start by mobilizing your queen to the square f6. Your knight on the square e4 is a menace. I think I will boot it from its central square. Before you move your knight to safety, see if you can find an exchange that is favorable for you. Impressive intermezzo. My turn to capture. My pawn captures your knight and attacks your queen. However, it also opened a diagonal to my king. Can you profit from this? Check? Yes, I see. Well, anything I place in your bishop's way you would simply capture, so I will move my king to the corner. How should you continue this blistering attack? Sacrificing this knight is the right idea, but not like this. I will capture your knight while your queen remains threatened. Look for a different check. How should you continue this blistering attack? A stunning sacrifice. Well played, Marco. You made me an offer I could not refuse. I assume you had a follow-up. Oh dear. To continue the game, I must block with my bishop. And now? Checkmate. Your bishop orchestrated a blistering attack on my castled king. In the next example, we'll see how white may exchange this bishop to avoid this outcome. Let's look at another example of how things can go badly for white in this opening. I have decided to capture your centralized knight. How should you take back? Your queen attacks my undefended pawn on the square h3, so I will step my king up to defend. Do you see an outpost that you could occupy near my king? Your move clamps down on my king side, giving me few options. How can you bring another piece into the attack? Your rooks apply maximum pressure to my f-pawn, so I suppose I will defend it. This next move is a subtle one. Do you see how to set up a discovered attack on my queen? Your position is dominating and different ideas are winning here, but try to aim your queen at mine to set up a discovered attack instead. This next move is a subtle one. Do you see how to set up a discovered attack on my queen? My position is paralyzed. Perhaps I will try to mobilize another defender. My efforts to defend are too little, too late. Do you see a move that checks my king and discovers an attack on my queen? Check. My options are limited and they are all bad. Your move. Check again. I've blocked your check with my rook. How should you continue? Nice work finding the moves in this example. The Dutch Stonewall can lead to blistering attacks on the king side. Let's look at a different strategy next. I have just played my pawn to the square c4. How can you best support your center? Time for me to castle. Now develop your bishop to its most active square. Your dark squared bishop is a dangerous piece, but I have a plan to exchange my bishop for yours. My plan is to play my bishop to the square a3, exchanging my bishop for yours. You can slow down this plan by moving your queen to the square e7. Your queen move prevents my plan for now, but I can insist. What should you play now? Pay close attention to my next move. Developing your queen side is a challenge in the Dutch Stonewall. One way to achieve this is by playing your pawn to the square b6. You're ready to fianchetto your bishop on the square b7 next. My plan is to exchange dark squared bishops, but there is no rush. Continue developing and fianchetto your light squared bishop. Finally, I can exchange the dark squared bishops. Capture back with your queen. Here is a typical position in the Dutch Stonewall. After I exchange the dark squared bishops, I like to try and exchange queens next. If you capture my queen, you will help my knight develop when it recaptures. Politely decline my offer by advancing your pawn to the square c5. When white exchanges the dark squared bishops, simply capture back with your queen and then play your pawn to the square c5. Let's look at another strategy in this opening. I'm about to complete my queenside development. Let me show you a unique way to complete yours. Your bishop will follow this path behind the Stonewall to enter the game on the king side of the board. First, move it to the square d7. My knight will hop into the central square e5. But you can simply play around it and continue with your plan. Move your bishop to the square e8. Trapped behind the stone wall, your light square bishop follows a winding path to activity. I may support my centralized knight. But this doesn't stop your plan. Move your bishop to the square h5. Remember this winding path. It is a good way to exchange your bad bishop for my good knight. Next, let's look at another plan that is possible in the Dutch Stonewall. Here is another attacking plan that you can use in the Dutch. Start by moving your king to the square h8. This is a middle game, but you'll recognize your Dutch Stonewall center with pawns on the squares c6, d5, e6 and f5. Your last move vacated the square g8, so that now your rook can occupy it. Sensing the danger on the g-file, my king flees, sir. But it is too little, too late. Blast open the g-file by pushing your pawn to the square g5. Remember, you first moved your king to the corner and then placed your rook on the g-file to support this pawn break. Recapture my pawn with your queen, taking control of the g-file. The initiative is yours. Let's look at another example. Let's get some practice with the Dutch while learning another plan. Start by playing your pawn to the square f5. I played the queen's pawn opening, and you've responded with the Dutch. Continue by playing your pawn to the square e6. As we've seen before, I will fianchetto my bishop and castle kingside. Develop your knight to the square f6 and continue attacking the light squares in the center. I will continue with my plan. There are different move orders to reach the setup that we reviewed in this lesson, but continue by playing your queen's pawn to the square d5. As you may have guessed, I will castle. Now develop your bishop to its most active square. Nice move. Your bishop is very well placed there. I am attacking your center with my pawn. Do you remember what move we reviewed here? Time for me to try and develop my queenside. What should you play now? Nice work remembering the moves that we covered in this lesson, Marco. Let me show you another idea. Now that you've castled, jump your knight into the center on the square e4. This early knight jump can be advantageous for you in the Dutch Stonewall. If I take your knight, you should take back with your f-pawn to open the file for your rook. Your strong pawn center is already dominating the board. Now, let's get some practice from the very beginning. Imagine I am your next opponent in a match. Use what we reviewed in this lesson to get a good position against me. Your turn. I see you're playing the Dutch defense. Let me test your knowledge a bit. Your move. Good move. How will you continue? That's it, just like we learned in this lesson. Your turn. I'd like to castle soon, so I will develop my bishop. Do you remember how to finish building your Dutch Stonewall pawn structure in the center? It's time for me to castle. Your move. You have a solid center and you're ready to castle. What more can you ask for from an opening? Excellent work completing this lesson on the Dutch Stonewall. With the strategies we've reviewed in this lesson, you're ready to play it on your own against almost any opening except the king's pawn. Onwards.